Hi, everyone. Am I audible? Can anyone confirm? Hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Meghna, please unmute your mic. There's so much noise. Yeah. So, guys, so we'll begin in like 2 more minutes. So, before we start, I have with me Dr. Gupta as well. So, Dr. Gupta is actually the lead lab instructor for the data structures course, which is currently ongoing for the second year batch. So, as per the info received, I mean, from the department, there is a good chance that the competition that you guys are having. So, you would need the help of command line arguments and maybe a bit of file handling so that you can take input in the form of test cases. So we will discuss very briefly what are command line arguments. I'll hand over the session to Dr. Gupta. So she'll discuss, for the first 5 to 10 minutes, what are command line arguments. So this will help you in how to take inputs in the form of test cases. So when you go for the competition. Yeah, Dr. Gupta, please carry on.
Hi students, I hope the whiteboard is visible to all of you. So one thing we want to keep this session interactive. Moreover, since there are just 4 or 5 of you, I think it will be very convenient if we keep it interactive, both for you as well as us. So I'm using C language here for all the example purpose. So assume that you are given a C program to write. So where does the execution of a C program start from? Any of you can unmute and answer. Am I audible? Okay. Anyone? From where does the execution of a C program start? You can even type in the chat window in case you are unable to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think yeah, you should carry on. The students seem to be unresponsive. So
Uh, okay, so I'll just. Okay. So generally the execution of a C program starts from your main function, right? So generally we don't give any arguments to this main function. So do you think there are arguments we can provide to this main function? If so, how and when? So in most of your coding programs, the inputs which you'll have to provide, they will either be in the format of a file where it can be a multi-line input. For example, you can be given an input such as this. So you will be required to read these lines and accordingly execute your program. You might also be given the input in the form of a single line. So command line arguments you can use when you are given the input in the form of a single line. So assume that your program is to find, let's say, search an element in the array, which is a simple program. So you might want to execute it with a call like /a.out. After that, you might want to give the size of the array here itself. So you won't be allowed to use any scanf statements in your coding competitions. Let's say first argument is your number of elements in the array, which can be 4, followed by the individual elements in the array, which can be, let's say, 1 to 9 and 6. So how do you interpret this input? How does your main function interpret this input? So your main function has 2 parameters. I'm just writing them here. So one is your int args, and other is char star argv. So this one over here, it tells you the number of arguments which are passed to your main function. And this one, what is it? It is an array of character pointers. So each element in this particular list here will be a pointer which will be pointing to a character, and from there you can read an entire string. So if we talk about this particular case, the value of args here will be, so since you see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 inputs you have provided to this program. So 5 for this. In addition, your first argument to your code will be the name of this program, which is ./a.out. So the value of args in this particular case will be 6. And what will be your array? argv. Argv will hold your all the parameters. So the first parameter is going to be ./a.out, and please note that all these parameters will be in the form of strings, not characters. So even if your program reads a 4 as your second argument, it stores it in the form of a string, and after that you might be having certain more parameters over here. So sometimes you'll have to ensure proper sanity checks in your code. For example, in this particular case, if you are saying that your array is having a size 4, so definitely there should be 4 arguments over here. So how will you include a sanity check for this? So you need to ensure that there are these proper sanity checks. So you can ensure this by, so first of all, whatever you are reading from here, argv. So if you refer to argv1 in your program inside your main function, anywhere if you use argv1, actually it corresponds to the string 4 which you have given from here. This is your first argument. However, for using it, you will require to convert it in a number, since I'm dealing here with the array which have elements which are integers. So to convert it in a number, you will have to use a function which is a to I, which means ascii to integer, and you'll have to pass this argument here. After that, you can treat it as a number. What will be the proper sanity check here? So I want to see that if the user says the number of elements in the array is 4, he should have provided exactly 4 arguments after this. So how do you check for that? So to check for that, you should look at how many arguments in total your program should have. What should be the value of args? If you look at carefully, you can denote this relationship as your value of args should actually be argv1 plus 2. And you should think about this why. So I'm just telling you a sanity check for providing an array to your program. So it's a simple array which has 4 elements, after which we are passing 4 number. So you need to have this sanity check here. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. I think this is more or less about command line arguments which you should know. So especially about the sanity check, if you have any issue, you can just raise a point here. Okay. And definitely the second way of providing arguments to your program is a multi-line input, which is with the help of file handling. So Sanatan and me, we are not going to discuss file handling in detail because it will take a lot of time. So you can do it in C with the help of your file pointers and functions like fprintf and fscanf. So we are not dealing with them as of now. So while you go out there for coding competitions, you should be very comfortable with command line arguments and these file handling operations so that you know how to read your data properly. I think this was the first point we wanted to convey to you. However, the most of this session is regarding algorithms and designing different algorithms efficiently. So I think we can get started with that now. So I'll be handling over the session to Sanatan now. So that he'll just get started with this. Just give me a moment.
Hi guys, is the screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in this particular session, we'll be discussing on, how do you think about the design of algorithms? I mean, in which way you should proceed. So far, in your second and third year, you would have gone through the data structures course as well as the algorithms course. I presume that you would have gone in detail. But now, because the competition is coming up, so what I'll do is I'll cover most of the algorithms that you have studied, very quickly. And I will ask you in between, some relevant questions. So I would appreciate if you guys, interact with me. So let's begin. So for now, the very first thing that I would like to discuss is a bit about sorting and searching. And so I really do not know whether these things have been covered in the past sessions. But instead of, approaching it through a coding perspective, I would rather approach it from an algorithmic standpoint. So we'll discuss, where you would use these algorithms, what are the different characteristics of these algorithms, how can you improve upon these algorithms and stuff like that. So let me just begin. So most of the algorithms that you see, that you would have learned in your algorithms course. So basically they are of two main types. So one of the types that you can say is, they belong to the category which is known as in-place sorting. So in-place means that without requiring much of a linear, you can say much of a auxiliary space. So can you sort the algorithm? Let's say if I talk about sorting. So can you sort the given array within that array itself by making swaps and doing comparisons? So you need, you might need some auxiliary memory, but if that memory is say linear in terms of the size of the array, so that is allowed. But if it's more than that, then you say that those algorithms are not in place sorting. They do not belong to this category. Similarly, another category of algorithms, it can be summarized as stable sorting. This stable sorting comes into the picture when your numbers say they are not distinct. So let's say there is an array where you have say 3 elements, 2, 3, and say 1, and you want to sort these. The elements are say 2, 3, and 3. So you want to sort this particular array. So this array that you're seeing is already sorted. So let me take another example. Say 2, 1, 3, and 2. So this is the 4 element array. So yeah, so let's say this is a 4 element array. I'm just giving a notation to this. So all the elements with the value 2, I've just given it as a notation as 2a and 2b, just to ensure that these are distinct elements, and they are even though the value is the same, but they are distinct in the sense that they are placed at different addresses. So now if I have a sorting algorithm and it sorts this particular array as say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3. So 2a should come before 2b, because in the original array, 2a came before 2b. So such kinds of algorithms, they are known as stable algorithms. So we will discuss the algorithms that you have studied, in your third year, whether those algorithms are, stable. We'll also talk about whether they're in place, why all these things are needed. Okay, so let's just start about them. Yeah, so most of the algorithms that you have studied in the past, they are more or less comparison based. So where, you make certain comparisons, you do certain swaps based on, if you want the elements to be, in the ascending or the descending order. So the goal is to ensure that all the elements are sorted. So let's say you have built an algorithm which makes comparisons and does certain swaps. So let me just call this algorithm as say some algo 1. So with this algorithm, what you do is say you first compare say elements 1 and 2. You check whether say A1 is less than A2, and then you move on to the second step, and then you check whether A2 is say smaller than A3. And similarly, say if you move on to the right hand side, you check whether A1 is greater than A3. So based on whatever algorithm you choose, you make certain comparisons. So any algorithm, I mean, if I explain in terms of the steps that you are taking, so it can be drawn in the form of a decision tree, where every node in the decision tree is actually a decision, where you specify that if you have compared two elements, so depending on if the element was greater or smaller, so you can go to either way. So let's say if A1 was less than A2, so look at this particular path. So here you saw that because A1 was less than A2, and similarly A2 was less than A3. So I got the sequence A1, A2, A3 as the sorted sequence in the ascending order. Similarly, if I follow, say, this next path, so I got this sequence as A2, A1, and A3. So even if you, so let's say you have built some particular algorithm. So if you build a decision tree for that particular algorithm, at the leaf nodes, what you would find is all the permutations corresponding to the elements in your array. So if they're not there, then that means that your algorithm is incomplete. So for your algorithm to be correct, you would have, I mean, all the possible permutations at the leaf nodes. So if there were n elements, so let's say we had these n elements. So corresponding to these n elements, you would have n factorial such permutations possible at the leaf nodes. Now, I want to prove that if you are going to use, or if you are going to make an algorithm which is comparison based, so then the minimum complexity for that particular algorithm would be n log n. So this is what we are interested in proving. So far I have showed you that for any complete algorithm, it would have at least n factorial such nodes at the leaf of this decision tree. So now, okay, so and if you look at a particular path from say root to your leaf node, so this leads to one of the solutions, right? And if I ask you what is the worst case complexity for this particular algorithm, then you can say that the longest path in this decision tree, so one of the longest paths is this one. So if you see that the level is 0 corresponding to the root, for the next level is 1. Similarly, the paths of length 3, let's say starting from level 0 to level 3, they are the worst paths. I mean, they take the most amount of edges to reach to a leaf node. So this is how you define the worst case complexity. So if you want to make a particular algorithm which is comparison based, so the goal is to ensure that all the permutations it has, they are at the leaf nodes. Secondly, so let's say our goal is to, I told you that we are interested in proving that any comparison based algorithm, it will have the minimum complexity as n log n. So what is the probable height, or what is the height that I should allow? And all the permutations should come in that, but I mean, should fit in all that particular levels. So what I'm trying to say here is, say this tree that you see here is, I mean, very fat and wide, in the sense that I can have another tree, or which I mean is very narrow, and which is, I mean, which is lean, and it goes something like this. So it is like very tall, and in comparison to the tree that I've shown you before, I mean, which was wide and you can say broad. So the worst case complexity for this new algorithm would be much more, because it takes me a lot of time to reach to the leaf node. So if you want to build any efficient algorithm, the minimum, I mean, the minimum decision tree that you can build with this approach, with the decision tree based approach, is a complete binary tree. If you recall the concepts from your discrete mathematics. So the minimum amount of, if you remember, the minimum amount of nodes at level k, or let's say if I'm talking about a complete binary tree, then the number of nodes corresponding to level k would be 2 to the power k. So if you can recall this concept, and we want to fit a complete binary tree to these n factorial nodes. So this 2 to the power k should accommodate all these n factorial permutations in order for your algorithm to be complete and efficient. So if I take a log across, and k here denotes the height of the tree, or you can say the levels. So if I ensure that, if I take the log on both sides, so this would be k, it should be k greater than or equal to log n factorial. So k is the height. This height is what we told you, we discussed that this is the minimum height at which you can build this binary, complete binary tree. So this k greater than log n factorial can further be reduced to this theta n log n with the use of Stirling's formula. I'm not sure whether you are aware of this. So the idea is, if you plot n factorial, and there is another function which is root 2 pi n. So this function, these two functions are asymptotically similar, and when n goes to infinity, these two functions converge to each other. They are almost the same. So if you substitute n factorial here, what you would get is, this thing is like, so you would have, just give me a second. So this thing would be order of log n, and this thing would be order of n log n. If you simplify it, so that's the reason, all of your comparison sort-based algorithms are minimum order n log n. Just to show you the nitty-gritties of why every algorithm is like comparison-based algorithm is minimum order n log n. That was the basic idea, for this particular slide. Let me just discuss, so suppose you are given an array. How do you sort an array? What's the most simplest algorithm that you can think of? So what you can do is, say, if suppose this is your array, so and so forth. So the simplest algorithm says that, okay, you scan the array. If it's sorted, then well and good. Otherwise, what you can do is like, you can create a random permutation of this particular given elements. Again, scan and see if it's sorted. So then you can stop. So this is like the simplest brute force based approach that you can implement. But the performance would be terrible because in the worst case, I'm assuming that all permutations are equally likely. So at least in one of those n factorial permutations, you would get a sorted array. And the time complexity for that would be again order of n factorial, in the worst case. And in the best case is like, the very first array sequence that is given is like sorted to you. So, it's like the most simplest algorithm, but just to give you an idea of how algorithms are designed. So this was the very first algorithm that came out, I think in close to 1720s or so. And this particular algorithm is known as Bogosort. So let us discuss a few more of these, I would say, simpler algorithms, which have a complexity of order n square, where n is nothing but the number of elements in your array. So let's begin with selection sort. So just to give you an example, so let's say if this is the given array. So what you do is you start from the very first element, scan and find the minimum in this given array. So if you look at, all the elements in the given array, 20 is the minimum. So what you do is you swap the minimum array that you have received and you swap it with the first element. So now this would be, so after this step, this is how your array would look like. Now from the next iteration onwards, you start with the second element onwards. So then if you find the minimum from this element onwards, so you would have 30. So similarly, what you do is you will swap 30 and 65, and this is how your algorithm will go on. So at the last step, you would have the sorted array as this one. Now, I mean, if I ask you a very simple question, do you think that this selection sort is stable? So stability means that, I mean, I'm just going to recall the stability concept. So let's say if this is your array, and if I want to sort this, so this should be the original order in, I mean, in the actual array should be maintained in the sorted array as well. So what do you think? Is selection sort stable always? Guys, if you have any doubts, I mean, please ask. Okay, Meghna says that it's stable. Meghna, I would rather disagree. I mean, take a simple example. Say this same example that I've taken. So if you go by the very first, I mean, start with the very first iteration. So you would see that one is the minimum. So you would swap it with the very first element. So this would be so next you would start from this particular, I mean, from this particular index. Okay, let me give you another example. For this particular example, it will be stable. Let me just give you, say, let me just change it a little bit. So say this is your original array. So if you compute the minimum, so this would be 1. So you would swap 1 with 3a. So this would be 1, 3b, 3a, and 3c. In the next iteration, you would start from 3. And since it is the minimum, I mean, you would stop here. Similarly, this and this are sorted. So if you see that this is your sorted array, and in the original array, 3a came before 3b. So this is actually not a stable algorithm. I mean, sometimes the result would be stable, but I mean, more or less, I mean, this stability condition should satisfy for all the given inputs. So this algorithm is not stable. Okay.
So I have a doubt.
Yeah, sure. Ask.
So how does stability help us?
Yeah, a correct question. So I mean, so let's say you have, so for now, for this particular example, you are seeing that, I mean, you're visualizing it in the form that you're given certain values and you just want to sort it. So you really don't care about whether, about the position of the elements, right? So
Yes,
it doesn't make sense to, I mean, to ensure that whether my output should be stable or not. However, think about this. So let's say you have an Excel sheet where you want to say sort, say all the elements in the second column. So do you think that the, I mean, if you do not ensure stability, so these Excel rows, I mean, the corresponding Excel rows, they should also be, I mean, swapped together, right? If you don't swap it, then the correspondence is actually lost. So do you get the point of why we need stability?
So I mean, if we are sorting the entire Excel sheet, the column, if we are swapping the elements, we're swapping all 3 of the rows together, right?
If you do that, then the algorithm is stable actually. So here what you have done is, so suppose if this element was at the first place, so these 2 corresponding rows would also be moved to the first place. The reason being, what you have done is this, I mean, if you place everything is in the row within the same address. So if, let's say, if all these elements here, if they are at the same address and you want to sort by simply this particular, I mean, column, or you can say this part. So okay, let me give you a more clearer example. So suppose you have a structure where the structure has, where for every element in the structure, you have multiple different values. And these values, they belong to, some individual. So if you sort on, say, one of the attributes of this individual, and if you do not swap all the other entries, then that correspondence gets lost, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's the idea for stability. So if you're, in your original algorithm, when I'm interested in only sorting numbers, so there it does not matter. However, when you talk about, sorting data with multiple elements within, so there it matters. Otherwise, you lose that correspondence. I hope this answers your question.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Let us discuss about bubble sort. I'm just going through this algorithm very quickly. So the idea is you move from right to left, and at every iteration, the largest element should be there at the end. So let's say if you move through this iteration, so because 77 is already bigger than 42, so there won't be no swap. So what you're doing is you're doing pairwise comparisons at every step. Okay. So because 42 is already smaller than 77, so they stay in place. You then perform the next pairwise comparison. 77 was actually less than, if you look at the, previous ordering, 77 is actually greater than 35. So you move 77, you swap 77 and 35. Similarly, if you follow this process and if you look at the end, so what you have is like the maximum value at the last index of your array. Now in the second iteration, you start from, the very beginning again. And at the end of every iteration, so let's say if the iteration is I, so I minus n minus I would be, the max would be located at n minus ith place. So if you started with the first iteration, so so the at n minus 1th place would be the max. Similarly, if you wanted the ith max, so it would be present at n minus ith location. Now, at the end of every iteration, you are seeing that all the max elements, they are pushed towards the last indices of the array. So my question would be, let's say if this particular array that was given to you was say sorted, somewhat sorted, or you can say nearly sorted. So let me just give you an example. Say this. So this is rather the same. So this is how your structure looks like. If this is the structure, so or let's say if you're given a nearly sorted array, can you do a certain step to ensure that number of comparisons and swaps, they get reduced? Because if you look at the original array, in every iteration, you are moving to say you are moving. In the worst case, you move n elements. N minus 1 elements in the first iteration. Similarly, n minus 2 elements in the next iteration. And in every worst case, these many elements are moved. So if you summarize this, so this would be order of n square. Basically, n into n minus 1 plus 2 plus 3. So this order n square is the complexity for this bubble sort. However, if you are given a nearly sorted array, can you think of a particular operation where you can reduce the number of swaps? Or maybe can you tell your algorithm, when to stop? So suppose that in the fourth iteration, you were at, you already sorted the array. So how do you ensure that so if there are say 10 elements in the array, so there would be 9 iterations. So let's say in the fourth iteration itself, you got the sorted array. So how will you tell your algorithm that do not do the last few iterations because the array is already sorted? Can you make certain changes to this algorithm? Okay, what you can do is, I mean, you can simply provide a flag. So this flag tells you that in a specific iteration, if you did not do any swappings, so there, I mean, your job was done. Similarly, I mean, just to cross verify this, in the next iteration also, if you do not do any swappings and the flag remains the same, so then you can stop the algorithm, because because there were no more swapping. So that means your array was already sorted at that point. So that is like one modification that you could do to this bubble sort. Okay, another algorithm, another quadratic algorithm is like insertion sort. So here, the idea is to, place the elements just like you do in a deck of cards. So, so let's say I'm just giving you an array, say A1, A2, A3. So what you do is you start from element A1, and you see that the next element that you're worried about, which is A2, if A2 is smaller than A1 or not. If it is, and I'm assuming that you're doing it in the ascending order. So let me just take certain values. So because 2 is smaller than 3, so what I would do is I would swap 2, and this is how the next configuration that, this is how it would look like. Now A3 is the element which is now going to be inserted in this already sorted pack. So because you see that 2, 3 is already sorted. So I want to insert this one in the already sorted pack. So if I compare 1 with 3, so this is how, 1 and 3 would get swapped because 1 is smaller than 3. Similarly, 1 would get compared with 2, and this would come in the front. So what you're doing is you're placing it like you would place a pack of cards, and then you're moving these cards one by one so that you can place the next incoming card at its actual position. So just for an example, say this is how the original, say at some point in time you have this kind of a setting, and now the new element which is about to come in is say 12. So this 12 needs to be inserted at its correct place, which is after 10. So you would first swap with 36, and then you would swap with 24. So this would be the correct position for this element 12. So just a quick question. So by now you have seen 3 algorithms. So can you tell me which algorithm is the best algorithm that you have seen so far for, let's say, an almost sorted array? Or how many comparisons you would do for an almost sorted array? You can do it with the help of an example. Say, so let me just place one here. So these are the 4 elements that I have. So if you were doing bubble sort, so you started with 2, then because 2 is bigger than 1, so this would look like this. So, and the swapping would stop here because 2 is smaller than 3. In the next iteration, you would start again. See, 4 is at its correct position in the very first iteration. Similarly, you would then, start from the next iteration. Then you see that the positions will not be changing anymore. So there are no swaps in this particular iteration. So now you can stop. So this is, if you look at this particular algorithm, I made 1 swap with 1 and 2, and a total of, you can say, I made 1 comparison. So 1 swap I did, and I compared 2 and 1, then 1 and 3, and then 3 and 4. So 3 comparisons were made in the very first iteration, and then further 2 comparisons were made in the second iteration. So overall, I had like 5 comparisons. 5 comparisons and 1 swap.